Unrest, the Unrest podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Unrest podcast. I'm Madeline Green.
And I'm Caitlin Stansel. Thanks so much for joining us back here. We love to have you. After we did the first episode of this season, Madeline, you were talking about Return to Babylon and how that story just seemed to kind of stick with you a little bit.
Yeah, I still can't forget it. And sometimes I look down at my fingers and pray I don't see long, like, weird tentacles. So definitely stuck with me because there's sometimes, for some reason, I'll wake up like in the middle of the night, and of course instantly I don't think about something great or something that's happy and I can go back to sleep. I instantly think about something really terrible. And so the past few nights, when I do wake up, I've thought about that stupid video you showed us pertaining to Return to Babylon, and I can see like those faces, and it just really freaks me out, and I don't appreciate it. So let's not do another one of those.
Yeah, but you keep sharing like the photo image on social media, and I'm like, scroll past.
The lady doesn't bother me, and then the other like little short pudgy looking guy doesn't bother me, but the one in the middle bothers me, so I usually don't share him.
or like the long fingers, like those are just so creepy.
Yeah, me and those fingers. I told you about the conspiracy theory about like all the famous people have like these claws. I watched it in high school and was like obsessed with that, and like, you know, the Beatles conspiracy. So definitely I'm very sensitive to things. So once I see something and it really sticks with me, when I wake up in the middle of the night or like I'm doing something and my mind like wanders, it instantly goes to those situations. So I'm a little pissed about you sharing that.
Well, when you told me that, it reminded me of this experience I had the other night that was kind of weird.
Mm-hmm.
So I too, when I wake up in the middle of the night, sometimes my mind
Pause real quick though. The best part though about us waking up in the middle of the night, like I can wake up say 3-4 o'clock in the morning, and I know that if I text Caitlin, she's gonna be awake, and I'll be like, do you think I'm okay? And she'll be like, yeah, you're good. Okay, back to your story.
I guess that's what we get for being friends for like how long now? Like 15 something years.
Any normal person gets a text from me that says, am I all right? They'll be like, what the heck is she talking about? But Caitlin, she knows I need someone to be like, oh yeah, you're fine.
Even if I know no other context to the situation. She just needs a little reassurance. But so the other night, I just woke up randomly in the middle of the night, and when this happens to me, first of all, a weird thing about me, I don't like to look at and see what time it is, because
okay. Yeah, you think like a certain time is spooky time?
And it always is.
Yeah, I know.
I always wake up like in the 3 a.m. hour.
Yeah, I do too.
And
now I will say this though, you should look up what each time means as far as your body. I don't know if you knew that that's like a thing, but keep going.
I just always associated it with spooky things. So,
I know, me too.
And that's why I don't check the time, because I'm like, I just don't want to know, because then my brain will like get even more crazy. But I woke up in the middle of the night, and I just had this weird feeling that like someone was there. And like, yes, my husband was beside me, but he was asleep. But like on the other side of me, on the edge of the bed, like I didn't look and I didn't want to look. So I didn't open my eyes, but I just felt like I was saying to myself, not right now. I don't want to see you right now. Which is already kind of weird that I was saying that to myself and not really like thinking about why I was saying that. Because it was kind of one of those moments where you wake up in the middle of a dead sleep and you're like half asleep a little bit.
Right.
You might still be dreaming a little. And I was just like, no, not right now. Like, this is not a good time. So I kind of just like kept my eyes closed, and I eventually fell back asleep. But when I woke up the next morning, I just remembered that happening and kind of how weird it was. And I was like, why? Who did I think that was? Well, a few weeks before that, this weird thing happened where I walked into our bedroom and AJ had a bottle of wine on his desk, which is kind of like my bedside table.
Right.
And I was turned away from it. But for some reason, I like turned around and looked in the direction of the desk where the wine bottle was. And I saw the cork drop onto the table. I didn't see where it came from first, though. Like, I didn't see if it came from inside the wine bottle and it like popped out, or like if it was on the table and it was like lifted up and then dropped. But it was weird. Like it obviously moved from a higher vicinity down to the table, kind of like someone had it in their hand, and like when I turned around, I caught them and they dropped it.
Interesting.
Because I didn't hear a pop like it had been in the wine bottle and it like came out or something. So it was weird, but I didn't read too much into it because I just don't like to dwell on those kind of things because I'll like twist it around in my head.
Yeah.
So I didn't say anything to anyone about it, and I didn't really like spend a lot of time thinking about it. And then the other day when I was talking to AJ's mom, I mentioned it to her and I was like, you know, this weird thing happened where I saw this cork drop on the desk, and I totally forgot that her dad, as he got older and after her mom passed away, they moved him into that bedroom.
Right.
And that's where he eventually died, was in that bedroom. So I kind of think,
did he like wine?
not necessarily wine, but Betsy said that he liked to keep things tidy.
Oh.
And I kind of think
so he was wondering why the wine is in the bedroom.
He was wondering like, why is the cork on the table and not in the bottle, I think. And I don't know if I turned around and maybe like caught him in the act and he dropped it or what, but I don't know. It kind of, I thought it was a sweet sentiment, kind of, that maybe he's tidying things up in there, until I woke up in the middle of the night and I was like,
of course,
all right, not right now. We can't do this at night.
Do it during the day. Do it in the daytime.
But actually, the reason I wanted to bring this story up this episode is because the other day I walked in my office. I had gone to do some laundry and I came back into my office, which is connected to our bedroom. And I left my cell phone in here, like on the corner of my desk. And I'd been gone out of the room for at least 15 minutes. So, you know how like your phone screen will light up like after you lock it, or after you touch it, it'll kind of light up for a couple seconds.
Right.
So I left my phone in the room. I went to do laundry. I came back 15 minutes later. And as I'm entering the room, for some reason, my eyes go straight to my cell phone on the corner of the table. And it kind of like rocked down onto the desk and it was lit up. Like someone had just like touched it.
That's interesting.
I know. Isn't that so weird? Maybe just grandpa was tidying it up for me.
Yeah, he's like, your home screen needs some help.
We need to clean this thing off.
That's pretty cool though. And the fact that, you know, he did pass away in that, like in the room connecting and stuff like that. I mean, for sure. I definitely think it could be him stopping by to say hello. Because it's not an old house.
No.
So it would have to be, you know.
That's really the only kind of sad thing connected to the house. So
right.
That's the only thing I could imagine it would be, unless there's like a graveyard we don't know about the house was built on top of. I don't think that's the case, but you never know.
Never know. Well, that's an awesome story. And hopefully he will just come and visit you in the daytime.
Yes, during the light, please. Not at night.
So for today's spooky story, we're going to focus on Glacier National Park. It is an American national park located in the northwestern Montana on the Canada-United States border, kind of like adjacent to Alberta and British Columbia.
I've seen
Yes.
pictures from there. We have to go. It looks so beautiful.
Oh my God. Yeah. So it says that the park is full of amazing forests. There's alpine meadows, rugged mountains and lakes, over 700 miles of trails, making it a hiker's dream. I know you love to hike.
I don't mind hiking. I just don't like hiking on the side of mountain faces, which is what Madeline made us do on my bachelorette party, where we were literally climbing rocks on the side of a mountain.
A travel website says you can relive the days of old through historic chalets, lodges, and the famous Going to the Sun Road. And what's cool, about this park is I went back to kind of, before I get into the spookiness of it, I wanted to see who lived there and who could these spooky inhabitants be. So the first was the American Indian tribes that actually lived on the lands of Glacier National Park. There were definitely American Indian tribes. Some I cannot pronounce, but the two I can, the Blackfeet and the Salish tribes, they lived there. And then obviously early settlers like fur trappers, Anglo settlers began populating this area in the early 1800s. Some homesteaders would later become the park's actual first rangers, which is pretty cool. So, sounds like a pretty amazing place. Obviously, if you look up the pictures, it is beautiful. But Glacier's hotels are also over 100 years old. And we all know what that means. That it would make sense. It would make sense that they picked up some extra guests along the way. The Belton Chalet is one of Glacier's oldest buildings. And obviously, since it's the oldest, it is also the most haunted.
Of course.
However, there are many other buildings on the national park land and lots of haunts to go along with them. An article called Glacier Haunted History had a lot of information about the spirits and spooks seen throughout the national park. And I'm going to share a little bit from that article. It says the historical buildings of Glacier National Park are home to a glut of ghoulish ghost stories and spooky accounts of specters that go bump in the night, which for years, former Red Bus Robert Luck shared with restless young passengers aboard his bus tours. And he says, these stories are not for the faint of heart when you consider that most of them are true. To document the tales, he actually started writing down all of these accounts and made this sort of driver's manual for other bus drivers to read and share with their passengers. And most of the passengers are always wanting to hear about these haunted ghosts of Glacier National Park. Some of the stories are as follows. At the Lake McDonald Lodge, a woman dressed in old-time clothes has been spotted by a security man and night auditor many times looking out the lobby windows that open to the lakeside veranda. Guests have heard a couple arguing loudly on balconies, though there was no one there. And a night auditor felt something run its fingers through her hair one evening. And it says just outside the park's West Glacier entrance, a resident paranormal prankster named Bob, who has earned his keep at the Belton Chalet by playing tricks on guests and hotel employees, like stealing room keys and just spooking the guests. Then there was also one occasion when a woman went down and talked to the lobby clerk because her husband was showering in their room and he turned around to encounter a young girl standing in the shower.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, he left for a short while. They packed up the suitcase and literally left the place. And that's when his wife went down to the lobby and was like, look, there's, he saw a little girl. His hair was still wet. And he was like, we're not staying here.
Oh my gosh. That makes me think back to our very first episode and very first real life haunt talking about Maria. And she was associated with Native Americans, kind of.
Yeah. And I just shared a little bit of her story on our Instagram and Facebook. So check that out. Robert also says that in my lifetime, enough strange things have happened that I think there is something to it. It's not that just we have these vivid imaginations. There have been so many experiences that I cannot explain other than there really are things that go bump in the night, and not all of them are bad. So he's definitely had a lot of experiences here. And some with, happy ghosts like Bob the Prankster, which is pretty cool. A few years ago, author and paranormal investigator Karen Stevens took Robert's stories and actually made a book. And it's
Ooh.
called Glacier Ghost Stories, Eerie Tales, Legends, and Mysteries of Glacier National Park. The reason she decided to publish this book was also because she had, a bunch of paranormal type things happen to her growing up. And so she decided that she was really interested in the story of Glacier National Park. And so she kind of dove in headfirst to the project of publishing this book, but also investigating each hotel that's there. It says that she booked certain rooms at the lodges that were known to have these haunted encounters from one side of the park to another, and started interviewing and witnesses firsthand, getting just everybody's story that could tell something that she could put in this book. She said that on one journey to Glacier National Park, she investigated the Lake McDonald Lodge that I talked about at first, and there were no vacancies in the lodge, so she booked a room at one of the cabins near the lake. When she arrived at the cabin, which it says it's cabin 2A, if anyone wants to know, that a ghastly smell permeated the room, and that in the middle of the night, she heard what sounded like a gunshot.
What?
Yeah. And so, she had been, working on her other books and just investigations. And it said in the morning, all the books that she had on the table were knocked on the floor.
And that didn't wake her up?
Just it says, I've been fascinated with ghosts my entire life, and I still don't fully understand how something that doesn't have a body can turn a knob, flip on a light switch, or make audible footsteps.
That's a good point.
Yeah. At the many glacier hotels, this lady has interviewed former winter caretaker named Steve Lautenbach, who spent winters overseeing the old hotel before he died in Florida in 2008. Lautenbach was full of stories about suspected hauntings, and on one occasion he explained to her that he had been making his rounds when he discovered this is interesting, an empty wine bottle in the hallway. Then noticed that the glass doors of the wine case were wide open and that one of the slots sat empty. No guest had stayed at the hotel for months, and there were no footprints in the fresh snow outside. So he goes in, he sees this empty wine bottle, like not even a full one, and no one had stayed there. And there was no reason, but there was definitely an empty slot in the wine case.
Ooh, I don't like that.
I like it.
The ghost got drunk.
And then it says, when reporters asked him if there really were ghosts, he replied, if I say yes, then I'm crazy. But if I say no, then I'm a liar.
Oh, this makes me think back to when we went on my bachelorette party in Arizona, and we went to visit the Grand Canyon.
Yeah.
Just because when we went, I could tell why so many deaths and mysterious things happen in these sorts of places. And so that's kind of the topic of our haunted history. Referencing this article from Forbes, it says, what are the odds of dying in a national park? They're pretty good. Not just because of the animals and the extreme weather conditions, but as of 2007 to 2018, 2,727 visitors have died in U.S. national parks. A lot of them have been natural causes, many of them suicides, and then for others, they have been accidents. And the Grand Canyon in particular, like I was saying when we went there, you're right on the edge. You can really do whatever you want. There's no one being like, stand back, don't go close to the edge. And we even kind of looked up when we were visiting, how many people have died at the Grand Canyon, just because, I don't know, maybe it's because we don't really have places like that on the East Coast, I guess.
Right.
Like extreme scenery, like the Grand Canyon, or even, California, their beaches are completely different than East Coast beaches. They're more cliffy and that sort of thing. So I don't know, maybe people just don't know what they're getting into when they go to the very edge of the Grand Canyon and try to take a selfie and end up falling over.
Not only is it you walking the edge, there's other people too, and it's just that like distrust of people that I can remember when we were there, just looking at certain people like standing by themselves and being like a little uneasy.
Like, oh, they could
Because-
just push me really hard and I would be gone.
right? And like that's it. I mean, so
Or-
definitely kind of a weird thing.
Even talking about hiking, like the hike we went on was to Devil's Bridge in Sedona. And I was like, I cannot believe they let people do this. I mean, I guess like you can't really stop anyone, but there's no handrails. There's nothing to prevent you from just falling off the side of the cliffs that you are hiking along. So it's kind of wild and crazy, but it makes sense that there have been a lot of deaths and accidents and that kind of thing in national parks. Just some examples to name a few. A 25-year-old man fell to his death at Glen Canyon National Recreation Area in Arizona. And then when authorities recovered his body, they found the remains of other hikers who had also fallen off of this steep height.
Mm.
And then others have died while climbing in Glacier National Park, taking pictures in the Grand Canyon, or snapping selfies in Yosemite. And then there's even a young man who was boiled to death in a thermal pool at Yellowstone.
Oh, geez.
So national parks may be beautiful and, you know, a great life experience, but they could also take your life very easily.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you think of like, I mean, more recent news would be like Gabby Petito, and
Yeah.
that's another way to look at deaths in national parks, or people who want to murder somebody.
It's a great area to dump a body, and, you know, likely they will never be found because they are so kind of vast and there are areas that are not easy to get to.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
I mean, I think you saw with that case, Gabby Petito, if it weren't for the other visitors to those parks who had video that captured the van, or just like remembered little details and called those details into authorities, they probably never would have found her body. And that's
Yeah.
probably what he was hoping, to be honest.
Oh, I'm sure.
And just talking about all the deaths in national parks. So one thing I do want to reiterate is that national parks are very safe. I was kind of joking earlier about just how likely you are to die in a national park, but you know, that doesn't go without saying that people have died in national parks. A lot of them have been preventable accidents and injuries. This is kind of interesting. It says, while poisoning is the number one cause of preventable injuries in the US, it is only the 10th largest cause of death in national parks. And then another is animal attacks. In about 12 years, with 3.5 billion visitors, only 8 people have been killed by wild animals. And then it says the most dangerous national park, if you do want to avoid one, it might be the North Cascades National Park in Washington State. It says this mountainous park is known for snow slides and avalanches.
Ooh.
So they don't have as many visitors per year as a lot of the other parks. They only have about 30,000. But their death rate is much higher. It is at about 652 per 10 million visits. So that's more than 6 times higher than the second deadliest, which is Alaska's Denali National Park. And it just kind of wraps up and says that, you know, really the biggest contributing factor to deaths in national park are just people being reckless and, again, not aware of their surroundings and just being kind of careless in how they move around the national parks and what they do. So if you're going to a national park, again, they are relatively safe, but there is a chance that you could die in one. Be aware of your surroundings, know what you're getting into, and yeah, you should be fine and not have to haunt the national park for the rest of your days.
But if you do die and do feel like haunting it, we'll have you on the show.
Call us from the grave.
So for this episode's real life haunt, I talked to Holly Dozier about some experiences that she's had. And what's interesting about her experiences is they have all been while she was in college, not when she was younger and not now that she's gotten older. It was all experiences from college, and there's quite a few of them. So take a listen. All right, so for today's real life haunt, I am here with Holly Dozier. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. How about you?
Good, good. So kind of take us through some of your haunted stories.
I would say that the majority of my haunted stories come from when I was in college. For some reason, maybe that's when I was like more open to it, but I would say that's the majority of the period of time when I had the most experiences.
Was it kind of where you were at in college or just different places?
It was different places, but it kind of just happened within my like college years. Mm-hmm. So a few experiences that I did have, I was a freshman at the time. I went to a college in Connecticut, and I was living in a freshman dorm, and on the first floor, that's where the guys' floor was. On the second floor was the girls' floor. It was around lunchtime, so I got back from my class and decided to go across the hall to ask my friend if she wanted to go to lunch with me. So I walked over to her door. Nobody else was around. I knocked on the door, and I heard a girl in my ear say hello. And I quickly like turned around, like, cause I was expecting someone to be next to me, and there was nobody around.
Wow.
So I was like, okay, that's kind of odd. But then I thought, well, maybe she's saying hello from like the inside and like, hey, like open the door.
Right.
So I tried the doorknob, and it was locked. And then I like looked through the peephole, and it was black. Like there wasn't a light on inside. So then I thought, well, maybe somebody's playing a prank, like they ran by me and then they like kind of hid, down the hall or something. And so I kind of walked down the hall, and like, there's literally nobody around. Like I am the only one upstairs.
Right.
So I'm like, okay, that was odd. And I just went back to my room and didn't really think too much of it. Well, later that night, this friend who I went to go ask if she wanted to have lunch with me asked me if I wanted to go down to a different dorm and see the RA, the resident assistant who used to live in our dorm that night. And I was like, yeah, sure. Let's go down there and hang out. So we go down to his dorm, and we're sitting in his room, and he's just like, hey, like, how was everybody's day? And I was like, the weirdest thing happened to me today. Like I went to go, ask Heather if she wanted to go to lunch, and knocked on her door, and he was like, did a girl whisper in your ear? And at that point I was like, whoa,
oh my goodness.
How would you even know that? Like, you don't even live here. Like, how would you even know about this experience? I told absolutely nobody. And I'm like, yeah. And at that point, like all the hairs on the back of my neck are standing up. And I'm like, oh geez, like, what is this? And he's like, yeah, she used to come and talk to me in my room. She would sit on my bed and she would talk to me. And I was like, Mike, I don't want to hear this right now. Like, you don't have to live in here anymore. I have to live here.
Yeah.
So, he told me about that, and pretty much for the rest of my freshman year, I slept with like the blanket up around my head and like around my ears, so like nothing could talk to me at night. And I never had any other experiences with her, at least talking to me, and nothing that I can like remember happening, that would have been like sort of weird or paranormal with specifically her. And of course, I remember one time some friends and we were like, hey, let's try the Ouija board.
Yeah.
And, at that point we're like, hey, I was like, let me ask who this girl is. Like, why is she targeting me and Mike? And of course, you can take this with a grain of salt, but she was this entity came through, and they were like, because you remind me of my brother and sister. That's what came through. And I was like, okay, but please don't come and talk to me.
Yeah. Well, that's good, but
yeah, that's great, but please don't talk to me anymore. So I mean, again, that happened to me in my freshman year in college, in my dorm.
Now, is this a more historical type campus?
I mean, not really. I mean, the dorm that I lived in was built in like the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't old by any means. There were older buildings on campus, but this was not one of them.
I gotcha.
And as far as like campus lore, like I've never heard of anything happening within that dorm. So I don't know. I don't really know why she would have like stuck around,
right,
you know, in a dorm room. It could be exciting at times, I guess, but
yeah,
it seems like an odd place.
For sure. That's crazy.
Another thing that happened, I think I was maybe a junior or a senior in college, and I was kind of couch surfing at the time. I didn't really have like an apartment or a dorm that I lived in, and I decided to stay with one of my friends who had an apartment, and her house was built in the 1800s. And it was like a duplex, and she lived on one side. And going there, I never had any like weird feelings about the place, but I slept on her couch, and I remember one night it was late. I mean, who knows what time it was, like 2, 3 in the morning. And I just like woke up out of my sleep, and above me, I could see like this ghostly man. And it was like, he was transparent, but you could see his features, and he had like a round face and a beard, and like little spectacles and like spectacle glasses, and
wow.
He was just looking at me. I did not see a body, nor was I really looking for one at the time.
Yeah,
but
I wouldn't
again,
be.
I was like, okay, and I just again pulled the covers over my head, and I was like, oh my gosh, please don't be there, like when I wake up. But that was the only time in that house that I ever saw anything. And I'm guessing that I told my friend, and she was like, well, I've never experienced anything sort of thing. But I don't know, that nothing ever came of that. That was the only time that I ever saw that apparition face in that house. Another time, again, this is college, and I guess it was probably like my sophomore and junior year. I had a boyfriend, and his father and mother were divorced, and his father lived alone in this house that he grew up in. And he wanted to go to his dad's house one weekend, and I was like, okay, cool, let's go to your dad's house. And as soon as I walked in that house, I was like, I don't like how this feels. Like, this house is not good. And I would tell him, I'm like, if you go to the basement or if you go somewhere else in this house, like, do not leave me alone in this house. Like, I do not like being alone in this house.
Right.
I didn't know why, but like, it just gave off a really bad vibe. And he kind of just brushed it off. He's like, ha, whatever. Like, you know, I grew up in this house. Like, I never saw anything or experienced. I'm like, okay, well, I don't like it.
Yeah.
And one summer, he was going to move back into the house over summer break. So he was fixing up his old bedroom. And I remember going over there with him to help like pull wallpaper off the wall or something with him. And we decided, it was late, so we decided to spend the night. And that was literally the longest night of my entire life. Like,
oh no.
I could hear, I guess his dad was home, but he slept downstairs and we were upstairs. And I can just hear in the middle of the night walking up and down the stairs, doors open, shut, like walk up and down the stairs, like down the hallway, and over and over and over again. And I'm just expecting like this thing to like pop through the door to come and get us. And I'm just laying in bed, like paralyzed, like I just want the sun to come up so we can leave and go home, like somewhere else.
And only you heard him that night?
Yeah, only I heard that. And he was like dead asleep and didn't hear anything or experience anything.
Right.
But I'm like, I'm not going back in that house again. Like, if you want to go, I will like sit in the driveway, but I'm not going back in there. And he's like, okay, fine. So maybe like the next week he went back to finish whatever, you know, he was doing with his room. And when he came back to wherever I was, he's like, well, something really weird happened. And I'm like, okay, see, I told you what happened. And he said, I'm putting together this TV cabinet, and it had like a glass door on it, like an old like 90s cabinet with like a glass door.
Right.
And he's like, I went to go get it, and I turned around, and it was just hovering. It was just hovering over the floor, and then it just fell. I'm like, yeah, I never want to go there again.
Like, yes, you can stay there for summer, but I'm not coming to visit.
Yeah, I am never going there. And then he proceeds to tell me that his dad casually mentioned to him how when he's sleeping, he sees this giant shadow figure standing in the doorway watching him sleep. And I'm like, nope.
Yeah, no.
I told you. I was like, I'm told you there was something there. Like, there is something not good there, and I never want to go there again.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
I mean, even like driving up to that house, I can remember like you just felt like something was watching you like pull in. It was just a creepy place, and I don't really know why. Like, it probably was built in the 40s, so again, it wasn't like insanely old, but yeah, it just had some crazy stuff that happened there.
Wow. I wonder what made you so like susceptible during your college years. Like, I wonder if you became more open or what.
Yeah, I don't really know. I mean, maybe it's, you know, just an age thing and just how I wasn't ever close to it, I don't think. I can't ever remember it being a child and
right
having experiences like that, but I was never not open to things like that. It just was more heightened in those, you know,
those years
for some reason. I mean, there was another time that I was driving from my boyfriend's house to my house, which was kind of far. It probably was, I'm going to say like 40 minutes away, and it was late, and I'm driving home, and I'm on the highway, and it's foggy, so I wasn't going super fast, but, you know, it's late, I'm tired, I just want to go home.
Right.
And in my headlights, I saw a woman on the highway in front of my car, and I thought that I hit her. And it freaked me out. I'm like, oh my God, like I just hit somebody. And yeah, I don't know. I saw her as this woman in front of my car and in the mist, and there was nobody there.
Wow.
There was nobody there at all. Yeah.
I would have freaked out.
Yeah, I was like, oh my God. You know, I was kind of like drowsy at that point, but after that I was like wide awake, like, oh my gosh, what in the world did I just hit somebody? What happened?
That's amazing. That's funny. And it just kind of faded away after college?
I think so. I mean, I still really like that stuff. Even in our neighborhood that we live in now, we have a slave cemetery in our neighborhood, and I'm like, ooh, that would be interesting to go.
Right.
Go and like, you know, just hang out. I don't want to hang out by myself there, but, you know, maybe with somebody.
Well, it's really cool that, you know, you're still interested in it. It's not like you're closed off, and it was just something during those years that brought things to you.
Yeah, exactly. although I live in a brand new house now, but I have, at the time, my daughter was maybe 3, and we were driving by a church, and she's like, I saw 2 ghosts in my room last night. And mind you, she had never like heard of a ghost or like talked about it or anything. And I was like, okay, what about them? Like, what, there were 2? And she's like, yeah, there was a little boy and a little girl, and they came to my room and they wanted to play. And I was like, great.
I think honestly that sometimes would scare me more than seeing them myself, is a small child telling me that.
and a child who is not watching like scary things, like ghost related things or cartoons with ghosts or like, you know, anything like that. So I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And then I would ask her occasionally, like, did you see them again? Or like, and she'd be like, no, I think if they ever came, they only came once.
Wow. Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing those stories with us.
Yeah, no problem.
I wonder what it is about age that might, make us more sensitive at a certain point in our lives to the paranormal,
Right. And I think just looking back to my college experience, I will say that being in college opens your eyes to different ways of thinking that maybe you didn't think. When you're young, you're with your parents and you kind of tend to think exactly how they think. And then when you get older, after college, you do use some of that same education from college, but you figure out other ways to think as an adult. But college kind of is the first time that you're really open to thinking however it is you really want to think.
Oh my god.
But yeah, definitely interesting. And I appreciate her for sharing that story with us.
Yes. And if you have a story to share, please do. We love to hear them. You can email them to us at theunrestpodcast@gmail.com.
Definitely check us out on Facebook and Instagram. Also, give us a rating. If it's a good rating, give it to us.
Maybe we'll give you a shout out on the next episode, but only if it's a good rating.
And until then,
Unrest in peace.